Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Mist. A very good episode with some interesting developments. So in this episode, obviously things escalate a little bit further in the church, mainly because of Connor, because Kevin kind of calls him out on like his BS and everything. It's like you want to become a cop because you're power tripping, you want to feel important and everything like that, because Connor isn't being reasonable. He's like, dude, I need to take these people with me because they're the best chance I have. The more people that are with me, I can go to with my family. Like, I get where he's coming from. It's like, okay, I understand. Like, it's not like anyone else was necessarily volunteering, like when this whole thing was going down, to be like, oh, I'll go with you to go check on your family. It's like, no, I'm gonna stay here. I'm not going out there in that mist. We don't know what the hell that is. But Connor's so frigid about it. It's like, no. I'm here to enforce the law. I gotta make sure things. It's like, don't act like I said, I love the hypocrisy. You're acting all high and mighty like you care about authority. All you really care about is saving your own ass. And once again, it is a situation of like, you're just taking advantage of your power because you're just like, he even goes as far as putting Mia and Brian in a cellar just to prove a point, and even later on locking Kevin up, even though he instigated it, because he's calling Aiden a liar, which I'm like, I'll get to that in a second. But at the same time, it's like, egging him on by being like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, because you have Kevin being like, well, your son's a rapist, so back off of Aiden about this whole situation. And he's like, oh, the fact of the matter is your daughter she got drunk and blah 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 blah. It's like, oh, I mean, shouldn't be expected with her mom being who her mom is, being Eve is, and being like, oh yeah, like mother like daughter. Like I said, we heard what happened with Eve from a certain extent. Like, at least Alex hears rumors about her mom. It's like that her mom is a quote unquote slut, slept around and stuff like that. But I'm thinking, and that's kind of been my thought from the very beginning, it's something similar happened to her, and she gained a reputation of being a quote-unquote slut, but something happened to her. Like, I mean, whatever the case may be, it might even be a situation where she was just with one person, but then maybe, like, she broke up with that person or wouldn't have sex with that person, and he went around calling her a slut. Like, oh, she had sex with this person and this person, and she doesn't want, Alex to get that same reputation, but now it's kind of being toted around. Like, so far, no one's really thrown that in her direction, except for the people on the football team going as far as calling her a whore and everything, at least some of the town has turned against her. It's kind of interesting that Jay's the only one from his team and everything with it that was in the store, because it makes you wonder. I'm sure the situation would be vastly different if, like, other people that were on his team were there. It's just a whole thing. But going as far as he has, like, once again, it's just, it seems like, Connor is power tripping. Maybe there is something to his whole, like, trying to keep authority and everything. It's like, okay, Mia, I get it. She's part of this whole situation, like, that she's murdered someone. But then he even threw Brian down there anyway, even though Brian was the dude that tried to warn you about the mist in the first place. Yeah, why are you throwing him down there too? I mean, granted, to be fair, Brian wasn't arrested, handcuffed, but still, you did that just to give a middle finger to Kevin because that's what he wanted. Now, what I was bringing up about the whole Aiden situation, about him being a liar, if you didn't know, like, I brought it up when I was talking about the first episode, the series premiere, I kind of threw it out there. I'm like, maybe we'll end up finding out that Aiden's the one that actually did, because currently the only witness to the whole situation is Aiden. And even though that conversation happened between Jay and Alex in this episode, him being like, I didn't do anything. Like, what did Aiden see? He saw me carrying you upstairs. I carried you upstairs, laid you down in the bed, took off your shoes, put a blanket on you, and left you alone to kind of sleep off all the drinking you had. It's like, I didn't do anything to you. So there's part of me that he wants her to believe him, but Alex is having a hard time believing because everything she knows about what happened, like, she knows because of the condition her body was in and condition she was in. But the only reason why she knows it's Jay, it's not because she remembers, it's because that's what Aiden says. And once again, he's the only eyewitness. Because it's that situation of, like, because the fact of the matter is, like, we don't know exactly what Alex has directly said. The only person we know for sure is Aiden. And the way Aiden's been acting in this episode, kind of a little worried and stuff like that, because, like, the whole, like, situation is like, he's acting like, oh, you want to help Mia, but Mia's possibly murdered someone. It's like, well, that doesn't matter right now, like, what someone's done. But then he's like, oh, would you say the same thing to Jay? Which Kevin obviously quickly changed the subject. But the fact is, he threw that in there. There's the whole conversation with the father, kind of about being baptized and kind of like forgiven for your sins. Obviously, it's obviously, him trying to distract the father later on. But a part of me wonders, he keeps yelling out, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner. Obviously, he hugged him because he took that as an opportunity. But I'm like, I think there's something there. So I think it's going to be revealed. I think that's going to be the thing. Like Aiden's going to be revealed as the person who raped, Alex. And I think it's going to put Kevin in a very interesting compromised position because it's like he cared for Aiden, he took care of him, and his entire time it was you who did this. Like I stuck up for you, I defended you, and this is what you did. You were like my daughter's best friend, and you did this to her. Like I've gone through so much for you, especially if something happens to Jay later on. It's like, oh, someone kills Jay, and then it comes back out that Aiden is the one that did it, or maybe Jay is a filthy liar and he's just making her feel like he didn't do something when in fact he did. Like I said, just because I feel like story-wise purpose, I feel like that'd be the twist that it was Aiden, but it might be a bigger twist to be like, oh, it seems like it might be Aiden, but in actuality, it really was Jay. So, I mean, it could go either way in that situation. Because the thing is, Alex is kind of in that moment, like Eve wants her to open up, but Alex isn't. She's like, what makes you think I feel anything right now? Because like, I want to know what you're feeling, with everything that's going on, but she's not. She's like, who says I feel anything right now? So it does seem like there is more of a situation of her kind of opening up to her mom a little bit, at least at the end of the episode, because the whole like time notes to balloons being like, help, we need help, we're at the mall and stuff like that, and she's like, her mom's like, can I help you? And she's like, yeah. I think the bridge between her and her mom already kind of didn't get along, but I think it's because her mom pulled the gun on Jay. It made her go like, okay, my mom, like, you have my back wholeheartedly. Yes, there were some problems here and there, just the way her mom reacted. Because I think in her eyes, it's almost like she's like, mom took it out on dad, and then almost maybe Alex feels like she's almost blaming her because it's like, oh, because I disobeyed you, what you wanted for me, that this happened to me. Almost like, it could be seen that way. Maybe that might be how Alex is feeling. I don't know. I'm not trying to presume I understand how she's feeling, but that's one way that could be a possibility. And so maybe her mom doing that is like, oh, my mom wholeheartedly is on my side, and maybe that's kind of easing that barrier between. Like I said, from the very beginning, it already seemed like they already have problems just because it's like her mom is very strict, obviously for her own reasons, just because she loves her and everything. But you're a teenager, you feel like your parents are just, oh, you're annoying, you're always set these rules, you're just being extremely strict for whatever reasons. Especially add on top of that, like I said, the rumors that have kind of going around about Eve too, so that just adds more fuel to the fire in that whole regard. So it is kind of interesting because it does seem like they are kind of creating a divide within the mall. Like there's the main group because they're setting up all these rules and stuff like that, but Eve and Alex are going off on their own. Kimmy went with them, as well as some other people. Like, no, we'll go off on our own. Because they even threw out the thing of like, oh, if someone endangers the lives of someone else, they get tossed outside. But it's like, well, that's as good as murder. But it's like, this is all about surviving and stuff like that. So it's like, that's some like apocalypse level stuff already. It's like, we're already at the point of like, if someone endangers us, someone's already thrown out, if someone endangers us, it's actually the security guy too. So that was kind of interesting that you've already thrown that out there. I mean, because so far it's all about like, hey, let's work together and everything. Obviously, the big group, like being in an apocalypse type of situation, trying to figure stuff out. It's like, hey, let's work together. Let's not steal from each other. Let's share food and stuff equal, amongst each other. One of the guys was kind of like, yeah, he was like, yeah, I'm gonna go with them. He's like, yeah, because I think he says I won't win in this situation. I think he's coming at it from like a religious point of view, like, oh, my particular religion, because of that, people are going to turn on. I'll be like the first person they turn on in a situation. I think that's what he was kind of alluding to. And just, I'm sure everyone else just has their own reasons for joining as well. But it seems like it's going to be like her small group and then the big group. And I'm sure that eventually there are going to be problems with the big group. And then it's probably going to become a divide of like, okay, there's Eve's group and then there's the group. Isn't his name Gus? I don't remember already. Like after a week, I already forgot. The main dude who runs the mall manager or whatever, him, like it's probably going to be some problems, and it's going to create an even bigger divide because it's like, oh, which group do we save with the bigger group or the smaller group? I mean, like you get the feeling like something's most likely going to happen in Eve's group just because it's smaller, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. I thought it was kind of interesting that I don't know the actor's name, but I know him as Alex from Continuum. He popped up in the last episode a little bit, but him and his friend like decided like, okay, we're going to take those bodies of those people who are in fact from the military because they found the dog tags on them when they cut their bodies down. That was kind of interesting that you put their bodies in shopping carts. That was crazy. But then like pushing them outside and kind of basically testing to see what would happen, but none of the bodies were messed with. Thought was kind of like, well, the fact of the matter is they were being kept cold, so maybe the bodies aren't being messed with because they're warm. Because there was one body that was already ripped apart, like in the parking lot that we saw at one point. It was still there, so it's not like they 100% take the bodies. They probably take whatever they want or do whatever they're doing to the bodies and then just leave them because they left that body there. So after a while, like once the I guess they get something from the mist, whatever's in the mist gets something from the people when they're killing them. So obviously they kind of got chewed out because they're kind of like, they seem like they're going to be the stupid idiots of like, oh man, we're bumbling idiots and we're going to do, we thought this was a good idea, which is like, you understand where they came from, but it was like still dickish of them to do that. But now it's also put the group in the thoughts of like, oh, maybe the military has some kind of connection to this, because Natalie kind of brings up something she had looked up in the first episode about something about the mist and this whole situation happening before. It's called Black Spring, and the guy that was with her was talking about the fact is like, oh yeah, it's kind of like an urban legend around the town that basically happened, all this weird stuff like this happened before because a lady got murdered. It's basically the town's cursed. So it kind of adds in that element I brought up last week's episode, kind of like, oh, could this be like a government experiment, or is it kind of like a supernatural thing that already exists? It seems like I said, I also threw out the possibility that it's a combination of the two, that it's a supernatural thing that's already existed that the government's trying to learn how to control, or at the very least understand, hence all the military people connected with this, Brian included, as well as the three that were in the mall. That includes Clint as well. So the four of them plus Brian, but that private's the only one left. He's like, I'm a private. Like, do you think officers are really going to tell me the big deal? It's like, we were just told to come here. That was it. Which does show that they aren't on the run. The fact of the matter is, they're here because they were ordered here. So once again, either now, whether they kill themselves or whether someone faked their suicides, that's still to be determined. But it's like, if they killed themselves, it might be because they thought, oh, Clint is the one who knew all of this. The fact of the matter is, if he's dead now, that means all our protocols have failed. There's no hope for us. So they kill themselves just because they're like, yeah, like Clint's the only one that knew what the hell to do. He knew what we were supposed to do after we got here and stuff like that. So it's like, without him, we're kind of up shit's creek without a paddle type of situation. That's what I'm thinking. But there's, like I said, also the possibility that they were murdered. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. So, but kind of going back to the church, the dude Natalie was talking to, I actually feel so bad for him. Like, because the fact is, we learned about him and like, oh yeah, he went to jail and stuff like that. So he's not like he's like, I've done some pretty bad things. So I was like, oh, the fact is, we introducing his character like that because he's the one that kind of instigated, like, yeah, let's drink, after like Natalie suggested it. That's why they kind of bonded a little bit. But he'd even try to stop Natalie from going outside. And I was like, oh, I was so... The moment it happened, I was like, oh, God, he's going to die, isn't he? Which kind of caught me by surprise. Like I said, they went through the trouble of introducing that little bit of his background. And it's like, oh, the character's already dead. So maybe that's also trying to introduce the fact is that it does that to bad people. Because, Mia... quote unquote bad person. So she saw something in the mist. Rather, the mist kind of messed with her. So... maybe the mist specifically targets bad people. Like maybe that cop did some shady stuff in the past or something. The reason why he got targeted or anyone got targeted. Maybe that mom. Maybe that's why they didn't mess with those two military offers. I mean, maybe it's not just because they're not dead. Not just because they're dead, but also because they haven't done any bad stuff. That might be the trigger to this whole thing. But that was pretty crazy. Because I was wondering what was the significance of showing you his tattoo. Like, that, like, butterfly or moth with a skull. But then it shows later on when his skin starts ripping apart. And then, like, he grows wings out of his back. And the fact is, Natalie is like, oh, this is beautiful. And she was even, like, I wanted to kill myself at first. I wanted to die just to be with Benedict. But it's like, nope. I don't want that anymore because I've seen God. And the Father's like, no, that's not God. And she's like, no, not your God. I was like, wait, what does that mean? So it does seem like she is turning into the character I thought she was, except a very different version of it. It's not like this is God's providence thing. Like, maybe it is, but to her, it's a different God. Like, because she looks at that, it's all like something else. It's like, oh yeah, whatever this is, it's a God of some sort. Like, it's not the God that the Father believes in and knows. So I don't know, like, how to interpret that. Like, it seems like that might be the route. She kind of rallies, maybe, like I said, rallies people behind her. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the true path that we're going to be saved and stuff. Like, I don't know. Like I thrown it out there that that's what I thought her story is going to be like. So, but it seems very interesting. Like I said, because every time we get more and more of a look at the mist, it kind of affects different things in different people. We saw what it did to the officer, but immediately it turned this dude into give him wings and stuff like that, and killed him by making moths or butterflies or whatever kind of the bugs in the mist fly out his mouth. Plus, it's like, what killed that mom in the first episode, or like that literally ripped off her jaw, or what killed the dog? Like there's something. I'm curious to see what that will be like. I wonder will we ever get a look at. I would assume, but it probably won't be till like much later in the season. So, also in this episode we had Mia and Brian kind of bonding, like, she asking for her coat and everything, and the moment she starts asking for her coat and he offers her, she's like, no, I want mine. I'm like, oh, I was praising you last episode. I was like, oh, because you actually didn't take the pills. It's like, no, it makes sense. It wouldn't come up immediately because you'd want to be somewhere private where you can take them without judgment and stuff like that. I was like, oh man, you're sneaky. I gave you praise, like, oh, you actually didn't take it. I was like, so I was right to criticize Brian for just putting the pills back. But then like he figured it out. He's like, you looking for these? But he actually hands it to her because it's like he's not trying to judge her or anything like that. He gets a paper clip and does her handcuffs. Really quickly, I love that line when it's like, Kevin's like to the door, like, okay, so can you like hotwire a car? She's like, really? Are you saying that because I went to jail? Oh, why don't you ask the black guy next? He's like, I'm sorry. She's like, yeah, I do. I do know how to hotwire a car. It's like, I appreciate you messing with him like that, making him feel like a dick for suggesting, assuming that. But the fact of the matter is, like, he didn't judge her. It's like, yeah, you got your own shit to deal with. I understand. So if you need these to help you, then they'll help you. I figured it was probably going to be a situation of like, I thought he was only going to give her some of them, maybe like one. He's like, okay, I'll give you enough to kind of ease you, like, kind of plateau you, not give you too much to kind of make you loopy or whatever, but enough to make you okay. But it seems like she's okay throughout the episode. So, but Brian shares with her the fact that he has amnesia and stuff like that. So, which she kind of breaks down a little bit because she's like, and that's a good thing. You're lucky because the fact of the matter is you can only remember up till now. She's stuck with all the bad stuff she's done, all the mistakes she's made, which I'm sure that's her baggage that we got introduced to in the first episode, like stealing what she stole, being hunted down for it. Like that one guy, he contacted someone about it. So, well, he was really talking about, because he was like, asking if the guy that she said she had killed was alive or not. So, but I'm sure that's going to come back to bite her sooner. I mean, granted, with the way the condition the town's in right now, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But who knows? Going to the mall, she might run into someone who knows her. So it's definitely going to be interesting when they, in fact, get to the mall too. Like, what does that mean for Brian? Because he is from the military too. Will the guy the private that's there recognize him? It's like, oh, Brian. It's like, oh, you know me? So that is kind of an interesting thing of like the fact is that they are bonding. Like immediately. They already established that last episode too, so it's kind of cool that they were building upon that. So, like I said, overall, a very good episode. It's a very interesting development. I'm curious to see what happens now. Like now that they're off on their own, I noticed Connor's gun dropped at the end, but like the moment kind of cut back to him, it was gone. So I assume one of them grabbed it. I'm sure. I wonder what happened to I guess he took the gun from Mia that she had. Not so either they have two guns or I would assume they have one, because I'm sure like no one else grabbed the guns or anything like that. So I'm assuming one of them grabbed it, for self-defense and stuff like that. So they're going to be on their way to to the mall and everything. I am curious to see will anything come about those red balloons that are asking for help. Maybe like Kevin and his group will find one next episode, and I'll kind of give a more, instill a little more hoping on that, his daughter and wife are alive, which they are, but I mean, they don't know. He's hopeful, but he doesn't know. So, and like I said, I'm very curious to see if I am right about the whole Aiden situation, whether he really did it or not, or whether it really was Jay. I mean, like I said, I'm leaning more towards Aiden, but like I said, I'm open to the possibility that it really was Jay the entire time. And there's also the third possibility, it was actually someone else entirely, so. I'm also curious, will anything come about those military people's body? Like I said, maybe that'll kind of prove my theory of like, if you're a bad person and done some bad stuff, then it'll do something to you. So if not, you're okay. And maybe they'll play a role into it next episode. It's like, not next episode, but later on, if that turns out to be the case, that'll be how they determine whether someone's guilty or something. It's like if the mist takes you, kind of like the whole witch trial thing, like, if you drown, you are human, but if you survive, then you're a witch, you know? It's like, oh, you died. Well, we had to make sure, you know, no guilt there. So maybe it's that type of situation, like push you out. Oh, you're guilty of something. Oh, yep, the mist killed you. Obviously, that person was a bad person. That might be where that trailing. I don't know. We just kind of have to, like I said, wait and see on how this all develops. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.